So welcome everybody. Happy Monday to everyone out there. My name is Jason Roba and I'll be hosting the Week in Strange episode 30 with a couple of very special guests. And I hope that everybody out there on Facebook can hear me right now. It looks like everything is going through. But Venice, how are you doing?
I'm fine, out better than you, sweetie.
Good. But I would love to introduce both of you here. And if you guys could just tell everyone here in the audience your name and what you all do with Magical Egypt.
You start, Annie.
My name's Chance Gardner. I'm the writer and producer and graphics guy, cinematographer, and sometimes on camera, quote unquote, talent.
And bottle washer, occasionally.
Security.
Nice. Security
and so I'm Venice. Sorry, go ahead, Jason.
Oh, no, I just said security. I love it.
Security, yeah. And I'm Venice McNeil, and I'm kind of back office girl, but I'm coming out of the office a little bit now. But basically, I do all the boring stuff. He gets to do all the fun stuff. So that's us, Magical Egypt.
Awesome. Well, Venice and Chance, with this, we're going to do, since Thomas is out of town this week and Timothy can't make it to this evening's show, we wanted to do a somewhat Egyptian-themed Week in Strange. So the stories that we have are all Egyptian-themed, stuff that's occurred in the last 6 months. Like everybody knows here, please, if you have any questions, everybody out there on Facebook, drop them into the comments. Thomas, if you're out there watching, hello. And we will have a pre-recorded version of Thomas's psychic weather report for you all today, which is a very important one. But I'm going to get going here on OBS and work the controls and get us going with our first story. So.
Oh.
Okay. Sorry, getting the story ready. All right. So, Egypt opens Luxor's ancient avenue of sphinxes to great fanfare. Egypt on Thursday, and this is Thursday a few months ago, Egypt on Thursday opened to the public a 3,000-year-old sphinx-filled avenue in the southern city of Luxor to great fanfare, having wrapped up restoration works that took over 7 decades to complete. In an attempt to wow tourists and lure them back after Egypt's vital tourism took a fresh battering because of the Rona pandemic, the country had a lavish ceremony to celebrate the opening of the Avenue of the Sphinx, with an ancient 1.7-mile-long walkway connecting Karnak Temple with Luxor Temple. I probably pronounced that wrong.
No, you did this right, baby. Karnak.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Perfect. All right. So it's the second such event in the 6 months following the quote-unquote royal procession that Egypt had held in April to parade 22 mummies to the streets of Cairo as they were conveyed to a newly inaugurated museum. With President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and his wife in attendance, officials said the event intended to showcase Luxor, a monument-rich city that once served as Egypt's capital, then called Thebes as the biggest open museum in the world. The first trace of the Avenue of the Sphinxes was found in 1949 when Egyptian archaeologist Mohammed Zakira Goniam discovered 8 statues near the Luxor Temple. Further statues flanking the road were uncovered in subsequent decades, with the excavation works interrupted for long intervals as Egypt fought several wars. The path originally had 1,057 statues, a third of which already had been unearthed, with the rest still pedestals, said Antiquities Minister Khalid El-Anani. "We are not done yet. We are still working to uncover more rams," he added. The statues are divided into 3 shapes. The first being of a body of a lion with a ram's head that was erected over nearly a 1,000-foot area between the Karnak Temple and the precinct of Mut during the reign of kingdom ruler Tutankhamun, formerly known as King Tut. I need to zoom in because this is way too far away from my eyes. There we go. All right. The second shape is a full ram statue built in a remote area during the reign of the 18th dynasty Amenhotep III, before later being moved into the Temple of Khonsu in the Karnak complex. The third and most populous shape is one of the Sphinx, a lion's body and a human's head, with the statue stretching over a mile from the precinct of Mut to the Luxor Temple. They were erected during a tenure of the 30th dynasty ruler Nectanebo I from 360 to 362 BC. Opet Festival. The highlight of Thursday's ceremony was a modern reenactment of the ancient Opet Festival, which dates back 3,400 years. The festival primarily involved a procession in which shrines of the triad of deities, supreme god Amun-Ra, and his consort Mut and their son Khonsu were paraded by priests on wooden barks from Karnak to Luxor in a symbolic recreation of their marriage. The 27-day feast also marked the Nile River's annual flooding. The parade would set off from the Karnak temple and head southward toward the Luxor temple at the other end of the avenue. With bright yellow lights illuminating temples and fireworks lighting up the night sky, a similar procession was held, with ancient hymns playing in the background. The festive atmosphere stood in stark contrast to an eerily quiet morning in Luxor. Most shops were shuttered and streets seemed to be empty only a few hours before the event began. However, a flock of visitors to the city was evident as flights from Cairo to Luxor were fully booked and the city's luxurious hotels filled up fast. Okay. Let me switch back over to default view so y'all can see me. Okay. So, yeah, that was pretty cool when that one came out. I think that was, I want to say, from November that story premiered. But I thought it'd be a nice way to open things up here with, it seems like a kind of a procession back into kind of an ancient Egyptian egregore that's definitely seeming to be coming back right now. So.
Absolutely right. And honestly, you couldn't have picked a better story for us to start off with. And it's really interesting that you actually mentioned egregore, because I was talking to Peter Mark Adams about Luxor and whether there was still an egregore in play there. And he said, yes, there is. And there are certain people that know how to utilize it. And so there are still things going on there, but they're very, very, very much underground.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. But Chance can talk about those ram sphinxes are very important for a reason. Do you want to explain to Jason why?
Luxor is amazing. One of my favorite places in Egypt. Cairo is a crazy, filthy city. And there's this amazing thing about the Egyptians, unlike anywhere in the world. They have this special relationship with their horn. They love to honk their horn. It's like part of the automobile operation, is that you're constantly kind of not unlike what's going on in Canada today in Ottawa.
Yeah.
I think we know where they took their tip from there. But Schwaller de Lubix, who's kind of the big brain, the mind behind what Magical Egypt is. He was certainly the person that fueled John Anthony West. Schwaller lived at Luxor for quite some time. And Schwaller de Lubix was a remarkable polymath, they say, you know.
Alchemist?
He was a modern-day alchemist, practicing alchemist. He was a mathematician. And a lot of people don't know that he was the head of the Theosophical Society for a while before he sort of outgrew the Theosophical Society. But Schwaller was on site at Luxor. And for people who don't know, Schwaller was one of the original alternative Egyptologists where Orthodox Egyptology has this idea that the Egyptians were sort of relatively primitive and this was the beginnings of civilization. And all of Orthodox Egyptology has proceeded from that, in my opinion, incorrect first starting point. Schwaller on site was there with this really prominent Orthodox Egyptologist, Adrian Drieton, and they hated each other. And Adrian Drieton was the one who proclaimed those famous words. They couldn't refute Schwaller's work, and every time Schwaller's work would come up against the Orthodox interpretation of Egypt, he just made them look silly. And it was so clear that he was onto something, and that everything he did sort of brought to light how incorrect the basic assumptions of Drieton and Orthodox Egyptology. So Drieton said, let's erect a common wall of silence around Schwaller's work. And it never really ended. So my mentor and benefactor, John Anthony West, spent his whole life kind of banging his head against the wall, trying to seek legitimacy and trying to sort of win an argument that he was never going to win. He'd always assumed there was a level playing field, and if he would just present the truth in some way, they would all, bow to him and apologize. And it never happened, and it never will happen. Right. And so one of the big departure points in Magical Egypt is that we've stopped trying to reach a consensus, and we've decided to just have a party with the fun people. And if you don't look at Egypt this way, then please don't come to the party. But Luxor is especially interesting because
Can I say one thing? Because it's otherwise known as the Temple in Man.
The Temple
of Man.
There's a
Temple of Man. Okay.
book. Yeah, there's a Temple of Man in the Schwaller's book, The Temple in Man.
And so the whole temple is basically describes a human being from here down at all different sizes, from a baby to a young child to a teenager to a full-grown man, right? So
there's a kind of biometric template where Luxor, the temple we just saw, is that iconic temple. Or if you look at it from a helicopter viewpoint, it's a biometric lattice where you put a human skeleton in, and each of the proportions of the temple describe one of the major articulations of the human body. And in particular, this was very important in the discussion of Egypt, because one of the biggest, most repeated mistakes about Egypt was people say the Egyptians didn't know what the brain was for, and that's why they scooped it out and threw it away during the mummification process. But the truth was actually exactly the opposite, that Luxor demonstrates that they had an incredible working knowledge of not just the morphology of the brain, but what the individual brain parts did. There was a Edwin Smith papyrus that details different kinds of brain surgery. And like, if your legs are numb, here's the part of the brain you work on. And for different ailments, they would know what parts of the brain to work on. And in the Cairo Museum, there's lots and lots of skulls that have been dug up that have very neat incisions in the skull for brain surgery. So you'll hear a lot. Some, fairly educated people. I'm continually disappointed at how many people say the Egyptians didn't even know what the brain was for, when there's so much evidence that quite the contrary.
And this will tie in nicely. One of the stories, I think it's the last one I'm going to read, actually is unearthing some bodies from I don't remember when, but they're so this might have a nice tie into one of our later stories too, what you're talking about. We'll see if they mention anything in there. But again, I think, like you're saying, a lot of the orthodoxy of Egyptology very heavily colors any mainstream article that's going to come out that we're going to say. But that's why I said before the show to Venice and Chance that the like the Week in Strange always goes, we love these tangents. That's what we live for in here, the strange. So it's like, we tap into something in normie world that they start talking about, but we look at normie world and see these threads that make this, like we're talking about. There's an egregore here of ancient Egypt and Egyptian magic coming back. Oh, and on a housekeeping note, I keep getting messages that my mic is too quiet. So Jade or somebody, Thomas, if you're listening right now, could somebody give me if my level is good? Afterwards, I'm gonna have to throw this through a EQ or through a compressor and limiter anyway. But if somebody could give me a thumbs up or something if I'm too quiet or if I'm loud enough. But
you sound good to me here, sweetie.
Okay, like, yeah, I know. Before the show, yeah. Just on sometimes on Facebook things get weird. Just like there's gremlins in the system with the OBS earlier with the music not playing. So hopefully,
Jason, can I just go to one place? Can I just go one place? Because you mentioned about the egregore. Yeah.
Please.
So I've been like nosediving into Rudolf Steiner. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I kind of was first interested in him when I was a child, but I couldn't understand it. So now that I'm an old lady, I'm finally actually getting it. Right. And one of the things that he talks about is that there are these races that are reincarnated over and over and over again. Right. And so our current race that is on the planet right now are actually the reincarnation of the people that were in ancient Egypt, that are actually a reincarnation of the people that were in Atlantis. Yes, right. So that's why we have these memories and this fascination, because we've all been there before, right? And I thought that was really, really interesting because, we're much more fascinated by this than we are, for example, the ancient Vedic culture, which will come after us, right? And so that kind of explains the fascination in the first place.
I love that. Yeah. And that Timony mentioned something about this last week about feeling, I think she put it, that feeling like we are the Atlantean civilization reincarnate. She put it in a very much more eloquent way. She's more articulate about this kind of stuff than I am. But
her and Steiner are on the same page.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And no, but it's just interesting you mentioned Steiner, because there's enough people out there right now where, again, the egregore, there's something being drawn forth in the present time about Steiner. And no, I really like that though. I've always felt a connection towards the ancient Egyptian civilization, but in school, like I loved all the artwork in the textbooks, but I'm like, man, this is some bullshit. Like I remember like reading it and it's like, no, they're showing the little artworks of dudes with like rocks on a stick with copper wire wearing a loincloth, making a pyramid. I'm like, so they could make these pyramids, but they couldn't find anything to put on. Like they had to wear like a loincloth, but they can make a pyramid, but they can't make something to wear. I'm just like, okay. Like I said last week in the show, it's like if you've ever used anything that's made with slave labor or prisoner labor, it doesn't work. So it's like there's so many holes. And oh yes, Thomas put in the chat, Atlantis reincarnation started a century ago. That's very interesting. I like that a lot. I kind of like you were mentioning, one of you, I don't remember who it was, either one of you said the thing about Theosophical Society. Yeah, that was you, Chance, about who was it? Not Steiner, Schwaller.
Schwaller
was, yeah. So it's just like, I want to say, yeah, what Thomas is talking about there with the Atlantis reincarnation starting a century ago. So we're talking about the 1920s or the turn of the century. Kind of, I would imagine there'd be a window there that would span, you know, as it started. So Thomas said it started a century ago. So I'd imagine maybe all the way back to like people like S.L. McGregor Mathers, William Wynne Westcott, Moyna Mathers.
Ledbetter,
Yeah,
Besant.
right. Yeah. And that whole original Golden Dawn crew and some of those people and
Florence Farr.
Yeah. And some of those people, like they were the early arrivals, I want to say. Crowley, you know, and that's just speaking of Crowley, when I was reading that article, it mentioned what Hansu, I want to say, is that right? Is that the proper way to say that? Yeah, it just reminded me of Crowley, and I wanted to go on to a tangent about Crowley with this, but since we're talking about the Atlantean current kind of coming back in, it's like it seems like perhaps what Crowley and Thelema and the Astrum Argentium and all of that there was some ancient Egyptian symbolism in there, but I want to say it's like that might have just been used as a bit of a metaphor for something that is tremendously ancient that could be Atlantean. And, you know, like both you've talked about on the Magical Egypt series, that, you know, magic is something that goes back, you know, far to Atlantis, and, you know, all of the Hermetic studies and everything. It's like you can go pick up the Rigardi Golden Dawn book. You can go pick up Magic and Theory and Practice and read it on a surface level. But it's like, no, if you go in there and actually do the work, just like what Phil Hine said, like magic is like sex. You can read as much about it in a book, but until you go out and practice it, you don't know it yet. So it's like this whole idea of like practicing magic. Like once you get past just, you know, reading through the book, and once you actually start doing things, you're like, whoa, I'm tapped into something that's ancient, but not in a simple or not in a simple way or a unsophisticated way. But there's this tremendous, you know, like Timothy talked about, it's an Atlantean current that, you know, if we're all the reincarnations of the Atlantean civilization, the magic of Atlantis, the magic of ancient Egypt is going to be part of our current egregore. And Thomas is saying, 1890s ish, Tesla, Wilhelm Reich, all these folks,
all the ones that get us most excited, right? Like, I mean,
exactly.
Tesla, right? All of the people that were like, wow, this is somebody that I want to really dive into. Kind of all came up in this time period. And then, of course, we have like Thomas and Modern One. Sorry, honey, go ahead.
Yes. Sheridan's added his name to a list of, you know, a heritage of people who've given insights. There's a word that we explored and really worked from, anamnesis. It was a Platonic idea that if there is, in fact, something to the idea of multiple incarnations and a succession of lives, the things that we've learned, things that have been demonstrated to us in previous lives, when we hear them in this incarnation, they instantly have a ring of truth to them. And that's why when people like Steiner or, for me, Schwaller de Luxor or John West, and 100 other people, when you hear somebody that has a legitimate insight into ancient Egypt, it just clicks and says, oh, yeah. And for some reason, like you'd said, around the world, regardless of culture, it's pan-cultural, people are just unreasonably fascinated about this. And if you think about how long Egypt ran as a civilization, it's what, 30, 40, 50 generations.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that it would, now this interest is.
And there's a lot we can learn for it, because like, as Chance was saying, out like America, right? It's not even 300 years old. Okay. So Egypt is at least 10 times older, at least, right? And so you have to kind of think about, they must have been doing something with their magic that led them to stability, to longevity, to healthiness, right? And we've literally chucked all of that non-material stuff out the window, and we're paying the price as a result of it, right? So that's just
we
huge.
haven't but
no, we haven't, honey. No, we
right.
haven't.
y'all all y'all in the chat, you two, Thomas, Timony, this whole group, we're bringing it back.
We're all
And that's
yeah,
what's
we're bringing it
beautiful.
back, baby.
Right. And that's what's beautiful about what y'all are doing with Magical Egypt. I think that that's one of the most special things we have going on in the media right now is what you guys are doing with Magical Egypt, what we're doing here with Beyond Room 313. And we've got, it's beautiful what y'all are doing. And to caveat of what you're saying, Thomas put there in the comments, Thomas says, I don't think that the ancient Egyptian distinguished between magic, religion, and technology. Beautifully put, Thomas. Yeah. It's like as Western or as modern Westerners, or as not even Westerners, just as modern folks that have been raised with communism or whatever flavor you want to put onto it to stay out of politics. There's this idea that religion is somehow this like backwards thing, because what people associate religion with is Abrahamism, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, and which those are their own things, and people have every right to, if that's their path in life, to follow that. But it's kind of like the rest of folks who want something a little more than that. When they think of religion, they unfortunately connect religion with the dogma surrounding the Abrahamic mindset, or the Abrahamic mind virus, if you will. That if we'll just go on another tangent here, we might only get this one story read, but since we're going on this, this is turning into closer. Yeah, this is turning into more of a symposium than it is a Week in Strange. But just this idea, I wanted to ask you both about this idea of a mind virus, and if something like this occurred in Atlantis, did this also occur in ancient Egypt as it's occurring now?
You tell them this what you told me about Akhenaten yesterday.
I just want to say, I returned to one of my longtime loves recently, Laurie Anderson, brilliant songwriter and performance artist. And one of the coolest ideas that Laurie put in the song was William Burroughs' idea that language itself is a virus, and that it is, in some ways, pulled us to this place that we were at, but in another way, pulled us away from sort of an innate talent that we might have had towards intuition and telepathy and nonverbal communication. So, of all the viruses, language is one of the most insidious. And like any technology, it takes away while it gives. And Egypt is this giant testament to, if you want to read an amazing book, it's sort of one of my new Bibles. There's a book by Ian McGilchrist called The Master and His Emissary, and it's all about the relationship between the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. And the left hemisphere is very linear, and it deals with language, and it deals with linear time, and it likes the familiar, it likes rote. The right brain is the opposite, where it works in simultaneous rays of association. Your intuition and your nonverbal things, your appreciation of truth, your participation in music are all right brain. So hieroglyphs are a language that speaks to the right brain. And regardless of what language you speak, you're looking at hieroglyphs, and the more you understand the synaptic web of associations that hieroglyphs bring up, you're operating with your right brain. It literally raises your right brain from the dead. And will actually prompt musical ability and much more intuition, like reading the tarot and studying the tarot. It's like a workout for your right hemisphere. And Egypt, one of the things that it does, why it's transformative and why it's so fruitful to study this, is I know a lot of people who have a little tiny raisin-sized atrophied right hemisphere, because our culture just only rewards left brain activity and really hates right brain activity. You don't want a lot of spontaneous creation on the assembly line, or most people's jobs aren't supposed to be creative. You're supposed to do what's familiar and what the person before you did, and do the same thing yesterday that you're going to do tomorrow. And so one of the things that Egypt is remarkable at for inducing genius and bringing to light hidden talents and aptitudes and geniuses that you might have is this tendency to prompt right hemisphere activity.
And thereby undoing some of the mind virus.
Undoing some of the mind virus. Thank you.
To kind of address your point, though, Jason, if you want to go egregore, right? Egregore is a really, really good way of talking about a mind virus, right? Because it is kind of like the magical definition of what a mind virus is. And there is a new book out by Mark Stavish that's called Egregore, and he addresses this point specifically, that if an egregore as a result of a group of people becomes too big because there's too many people, or it lasts for too long, the nature of it is it's going to become corrupted. right?
Mhm.
Okay. Just because of the sheer size of number of people with all of their stuff injecting it into this egregore, right? And so you have something like the Rosicrucian order that deliberately deconstruct and blow up their egregore. I think it's like every 10 years so that this doesn't happen, right? So they'll literally shut down their order and reboot it again so that the egregore doesn't get corrupt. So you can see that ancient Egypt started out in perfection. It started out at the best that it could, and it went down and down and down and down. So yeah, there was an egregore and it got blown up, right? We have so many egregores right now, and they're all fighting with each other, and it's all blown up. And so if there's humans in Atlantis, you would have to assume that the very nature of the length of that culture and the number of people involved, if there was an egregore, probably the same thing happened there, in my opinion.
Okay, one more thing about Sheridan's point. We live in an extremely fragmented part of the Industrial Revolution hangover. And one of the serious things about modern education, formal education system, everything's fragmented and regimented so that you jump from one subject to another before you're finished with an idea just because the bell rings. And it's very much symptomatic of the idea that the Egyptian culture seems to be integrated and holistic, whereas we're very fragmented. So in modern Western society, the doctor doesn't particularly care about what you eat, and the psychiatrist doesn't care about, a rash that you might have, and your priest doesn't care about what kind of car you drive and whatever. In Egypt, there was an integrated nature. Like, nature is seamless, and there's no really, except for completely artificial separations between literature and theology that we talk about it, or theology and psychology. And to your point about religion, and that word religion, I've been doing quite a lot of work lately. Please watch season 2 and season 3, because we talk about this quite a bit.
I will.
One of the reasons that's kept Egypt from breaking through, and one of the things that Egyptology is still mired in, and one of the things that has been incredibly disempowering, like one of the worst crimes against humanity in what seems to be a buffet of crimes against humanity lately, is the idea of labeling something as religion. Religion is a left-handed insult, that calling something religion instead of a science. What does that mean? The difference between a science is provable. Science is like math. Repeatable. Religion indicates that you have to accept something on faith without any proof. And there is no anything in Egypt that fulfills that term that we think of as religion, that everything in Egypt was a science. It just happened to be a science that explains and codifies and schematizes things that we think of as the domain of religion, because to this day, nobody knows what consciousness is. With all of our machines and all of our technology, no one can say what that thing is between your ears. And they were quite explicit about what it was in Egypt. And the more work I've done on Egypt, the more I realize that each of these temples, in particular the Temple of Man, is a 3D interactive book, and it is the owner's manual for the human psyche. For some reasons that I've come to believe are just intentionally disempowering for us. If you've ever read Machiavelli, The Prince, since the Dark Ages, there's been manuals for the people in charge to how to maintain subjugation of a population. And one of the biggest ones is remove people from their history.
And their knowledge.
Your history is your identity. And your knowledge of yourself. In particular, let's just slowly withdraw knowledge of things that people could do that would make them impossible to subjugate. And so a lot of the actual science from Egypt codifies and transmits these states of consciousness beyond the 7 senses that we think of. And very much like you clip a bird's wings to keep it from flying away, all of the best attributes of consciousness, even as Graham says, there's a war on your ability to turn the channel of your consciousness through psychedelics. It's incredibly illegal, even though it's a victimless crime. I know a few victims, but
it's I just want to say with that, just as a caveat, the sweetest thing, a good friend of mine's, my best friend's son, made a comment to me one time that Jason, he said, "Jason, do you know why drugs are illegal?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, they're bad." I wanted to, and he's like, "It's because there are other realities, and sometimes drugs can take you into other realities." And I'm like, fuck, this guy he knows. He's 7 years old. And I'm just like, oh God, you know, and it's just like this fucking moment of just pure genius of a beautiful
For
soul.
a 7-year-old.
He might be the reincarnation of Terrence McKenna.
Right. And then just going right back to talking about video games and you know, the candy we're going to get or something.
Anyway, back to Halo.
It was just, it was just the most beautiful thing. And I'm like, oh yeah, they're illegal because they do bad things to people. And it's like, but the whole point is that, you know, that because the man doesn't want, or however he put it, you know, doesn't want people to experience those realities. And I'm like, yeah, that is very McKenna, like you said. But yeah, that just reminded me. So, you know, we're talking about LSD earlier before we went on air, and it just is interesting the way that can be used, that LSD can both be used to open up someone, and also it can be used to open up someone for nefarious purposes with MK Ultra and, you know, pain drug hypnosis, as some folks have called it, where it's like it is a tool, and the opening of those avenues within the psyche, within consciousness, if you will, can be used for terrible things too. Just like anything, you know, magic is
just like anything,
magic.
yeah.
Right. You know,
like, I mean, it naturally too, like if you like the same channels can be opened with LSD as can be with, for example, Kundalini, right? Yep. And if you haven't done your work on yourself, right, on your state of mind, on basically every kind of different levels that your chakra indicates, and you have a Kundalini event, you can go absolutely crazy as well with no drugs included, right? Exactly. So Kundalini and drugs, they're kind of about accessing these other realms of consciousness. And the reason that Luxor focuses so intently on that is because when you do, and when you do it with intent, you can access knowledge, all knowledge, right? And so when people are like, how are they so smart? How did they know how to do this? How did they know this was there? Because they were able to access it, right? And that's the mind-blowing thing about Egypt. That's the answer of how did they know everything, is because they were able to access it through these altered states of consciousness. And that is the thing I think that's most intimidating to the powers that be. Yeah.
Right.
One of the, while we're still on Luxor, and in light of what Bernice just said about this anomalous knowledge, they call it, knowing things that you shouldn't have been able to know. And it's only because our history is so distorted about our past that people have to invoke aliens and stuff, and just ridiculous links that people have to go to explain how they were so smart, when in fact, there's lots of other ways to explain the kind of anomalous knowledge and anomalous technology. In season 2 of Magical Egypt, it's a radically different approach, and we really narrowed in on being able to speak to our own expertise in the riddle, you know, bringing what you can to the riddle of ancient Egypt. Season 2 is a forensic reconstruction of the artwork. And what we do is demonstrate the degree of technological sophistication in the art. And there is a technique, and you see it at Luxor. And so at Luxor, the rams are sphinx bodies with human heads. And when you follow that walkway to Karnak, which is quite a walk, in Karnak, there is a very particular sculpture of a ram with a human. The support of the chin of the ram is a model of the pharaoh, but it's very unusual. It's so standard. Architects and people who do industrial design will know that word. The word standard, it has to do with this particular artistic technique, and where you always know it's a human figure, but the legs are always fused into one thing. Typically, the arms will be folded, and there's the decorative headdress and whatnot. So in Karnak, in these ram sculptures, you see the ram and the nose. There's a very characteristic double bulb of the nose. And then underneath, there's a block. There's the head of the pharaoh. There's the torso of the pharaoh, and then the fused legs. So in episode 2, we do something that is a genuinely history-bending, groundbreaking discovery, where we made the first inroads into something that turns out is present in all of the art, and not just Egyptian art, but Vedic art and ancient art from around the world, ancient Aztec art. There are actual brain schematics. If you look at the brain stem, which is arguably the source of consciousness, in addition to the blood and lymphatic and the electrical system, but the actual morphology of the brain stem is incorporated in the statues in Karnak. And the individual articulations, I mean, it is amazing where there's something called the pons that is exactly the torso that looks like crossed arms. The legs are fused together as the brainstem, the medulla oblongata. And then all of these bits, it looks like a little man. So when you hear the Aztecs say there's a little man living in your head, there's actually this living little weird little alien with fused legs together. And they revered that to the extent that they immortalized it in their art. But if you show up expecting them to be a primitive civilization, you're going to say, oh, that's confirmation bias. And we hear confirmation bias so often. But it's in the context of consciousness. It's not unlike how, there's a picture of a pot leaf outside the pot store. When you go to these temples to learn about your consciousness, there are statues of the brain morphology, like literally medically accurate schematics that are used in the art in this technique called Gestalt switch. Where if you've ever seen those pictures where if you look at it one way, it's an old lady, and if you look at it another way, it's a young lady, or it's a duck and it's a whatever. The art uses that so that it, on the surface, if you just walk up and look at it superficially, it looks like a pharaoh standing there. But then if you look at it next to the brainstem, you'll see articulation by articulation. They've perfectly sculptured the brainstem. And it's not just a matter of cutting the brain open and drawing what you see, but each of the articulations and the context that it's used in give you insights into the nature of that part of the brain and what its role is in consciousness. So when you see the Ishtar and Inanna statues, same thing, the fused legs, multiple breasts, like a vest of hundreds of breasts where the pons is, and the generative organs in your little man are actually where they would be anatomically. The brain looks very cool and strange. And so the brain in your thalamus. So the third eye, by the way, Gary Osborne is one of the researchers, the amazing work of amazing man, Gary Osborne, shows, demonstrates over and over again. It's never been a big secret, but your third eye isn't just one thing. It's not just the pineal gland, as people believe, but it's this triad, the Holy Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, or the Christian Trinity, is your thalamus, pineal gland, and pituitary gland. And so the thalamus, these double lobes, are exactly like the snout of a ram. And the way that the nostrils are is exactly the morphology of your thalamus. And so if you watch season 2, it's 6 episodes where we forensically deconstruct the art. And we show again and again that this sacred art is actually these fantastically sophisticated and perfectly accurate schematics of brain structure in the context of a temple that studies mysteries of consciousness.
And so back to the news story, they don't even get that. They're like, oh, let's just reconstruct something, right? I mean, like, it's just crazy. It's for those that have eyes to see. And it's very hard for us to see today because we don't even have a model of consciousness that makes sense, right? So we're looking at something and trying to compare it to a model that doesn't exist, but they had one, and it's very, very cool. So we've dragged this one on. I don't even know how many stories we have to get to, honey.
Well,
I'm
this caveats nicely into the next one. So I'm just going to go straight into this one then. Moment. I got to go to another tab here, and I'm going to put up on OBS the graphic for this one while I'm talking. Bam. Okay.
Ooh.
This story is called The Human Lion Figure Older Than the Sphinx. Can it provide us with a clue about the symbolism of the Sphinx? So I'm sure you guys are going to enjoy this one and be able to tear it apart nicely. Okay. The Sphinx is one of the most fascinating figures in human civilization. In Egyptian and Greek folklore, it is a human-lion hybrid creature with supernatural powers. The Great Sphinx of Giza, Egypt, which is 4,500 years old, is the first thing that comes to mind when we think of a sphinx. But there are many other human-lion figures in the ancient world. The Greeks, the Hittites, the Persians, and the Indians all had their own versions of a human with a lion's body. What does the Sphinx stand for? What was so popular in ancient times? Oh, why was it so popular in ancient times? Was it the first attempt by humans to imagine hybridization and genetic engineering? Or was there any religious significance to it? While it is impossible to determine the actual meaning of the Sphinx, we may have a hint if we go back in time and look at the first human lion figure we have unearthed. How far back in time must we go? At least 35,000 years ago. This is the age of the oldest known human lion figure. When I initially heard about this incredible finding, my immediate thought was, quote, what made ancient people think of a human-animal hybrid that they couldn't possibly have come across? Unquote. God damn. These fucking people are square. All right, carrying on. Before we know about what the prehistoric lion man meant, let's learn a little more about its discovery. In 1937, German archaeologists led by Robert Wetzel began excavating the Holstein Stadel cave in Swabia, Germany. 2 years later, on August 25th, 1939, geologist Otto Fultzung discovered a unique figurine. It was fractured mammoth ivory sculpture. The archaeologists could not continue their investigation with the outbreak of World War II a week later. At the nearby Museum Ulm, they tucked the figurine in a corner of the stockroom. Wetzel resumed the excavations after the war, and more mammoth ivory fragments were discovered. Archaeologists could reconstruct the figure in 1987, exhibiting feline traits with a human lower body. Okay, I'm saying this wrong. It was mammoth ivory, not a giant, using mammoth not as a descriptor, but it's actually from a creature, mammoth ivory. Okay, carrying on. The researchers named it Löwenmensch, or Lion Man. Excavations continued, and they completed another restoration in 2012, raising the figure's height from 296 to 300 millimeters. Radiocarbon dating of the statue put it between 3,500 to 40,000 years old. 35,000 to 40,000 years old, excuse me. When you look at the figure, you will notice a human lower body with a lion's face, but no mane. This first led experts to conclude that the lion was a female lion. But after radiocarbon dating, they confirmed it belonged to an era in Europe, which the Etruscan cave lion was common. The cave lion was much bigger than a modern lion and lacked a mane. There is much discussion regarding the figure's gender, but in 2013, archaeologists found a triangular platelet resembling male genitals. It was attached to the Löwenmensch. What does this lion man represent? The clues may lie in other objects found in the cave. Archaeologists unearthed bone tools, antlers, pendants, beads, and jewelry made of animal bones in the same cave that they discovered the lion man. What were the ancient people trying to say with this human-lion hybrid? Interpretations of the lion man. In 2008, archaeologists found another lion man statue at the Hohefels cave in Swabia, Germany. Along with this lion man figure, an intriguing find was that the flutes made from animal bones. We look at this finding and compare it with the previous lion man from Hohenstein-Stadel. We can conclude that a lion man figures had religious importance. They belonged to a shamanistic cult. According to archaeologist Nicholas Conrad, quote, the occupants of Hohefels and the Ach Valley of Holstein-Stadel and the Lone Valley must have been members of the same cultural group that shared beliefs and practices connected with the theanthropic images of fields and humans, and that the discovery of the second Löwenmensch lends support to the hypothesis that Aborigine people practiced a form of shamanism. Okay, so I'm going to carry on here and just take this over to you guys, and maybe we can talk a little bit about the symbolism of hybridization of man with cat or man with lion, whatever this is, because I would imagine what they're going on here is getting a little square and a little bit farther from actuality.
You want to start?
Well, first of all, it's interesting that for the longest time, academia, history, and Egyptology were adamant that nothing of importance happened before 4,000 years old. There's a character out there, Michael Cremo, who you can see a lot of his work in, used to be Atlantis Rising, this amazing Doug Kenyon and Atlantis Rising, which doesn't exist anymore. But you should see Michael Cremo's book there. He has a book called Forbidden Archaeology, and he demonstrates absolutely conclusively that there are ruins and there are religious artifacts that date back millions of years, things that have unearthed in deep mines that haven't seen the light of day for millions of years, showing that there was a sophisticated culture, and in place all the way back to Göbekli Tepe, and apparently way before that, people were using these small artifacts and trinkets. Hohefels is where the first Venus de Milos, one of the earliest Venus de Milos, and the Venus de Milo sculpture is another one. You notice, by the way, they're all about that 30 to 40, the measurement that you've read in millimeters. Being an American, I'm like a baby when it comes to metrics. I live in Australia and I literally don't know how to buy cheese here because I don't know the metric system.
He doesn't know how to get to the store, let alone buy the cheese.
A little cube of cheese or whether I have to back my truck up when I buy 200 grams of cheese. I have no idea. Anyway.
Yeah. How tall is that? I don't know millimeters at all. Is that thing a couple inches tall or is it a couple feet tall?
Well, here's the funny thing. It's exactly brainstem size. Oh. It's real size. So in season 2, Brad Clausen demonstrates in this series of the earliest sculptures that they not only had religious aspects, but the Venus de Milo in particular, the little statues of Osiris, they were the exact size of the brainstem as if they were sort of a visual teaching tool. Also, when you look at cave art, the fantastic Lascaux caves, but a lot of cave art. There's an amazing cave in the Siwa Oasis of Egypt as well that has these fantastic paintings on them. And I wonder sometimes if this might have some application for these hybridized statues. The lion is the apex predator. So if you're into Strange, This Week in Strange, there's a practice among certain occultists and royalty that you're not really an apex predator until you've consumed human flesh. So every once in a while when you hear stories of people who love adrenochrome or people who are just practice ritual cannibalism so that they can assert themselves at the pinnacle of the food chain, the lion is the pinnacle of the food chain. And one of the traditional uses of miniatures is a kind of magic where you have a dominance, like the control of these things through using a little statue. But another thing that I think is more interesting is much more Vedic. It's certainly Eastern. You can transfer your consciousness into animals accordingly. I don't know how to do it myself, but you can transfer your consciousness into animals purportedly through the use of certain shamanic techniques. And so in these caves, there are fantastic paintings, but a lot of these paintings, you don't realize until it's been pointed out to you, are perfect depictions of what animals look like when you're up in the air. Like if your consciousness was in a bird and then you did a flyover. When you look at these paintings, I didn't really get how cool this was until somebody pointed this out. You not only see the animals that they paint, but you see their shadow going off in one direction, like if you were seeing that. That's amazing to me. So one of the things that I think about when I get when I see these little statues and when we see those things is obvious. Well, not obviously, but it hints at the idea that there might have been, these were operative tools for magical and shamanic practices.
Mine's much more sci-fi. Do you want to hear mine?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Okay, so I just want to give you a disclaimer. All right. First of all, I'm going to be very boring because I'm going to be talking about Rudolf Steiner again. And the disclaimer is that the more Rudolf Steiner I read, the more sci-fi I see that he is, right? And it just blows my mind. So Rudolf Steiner talks about the third epoch of the Atlantean root race, and that in this period, the human physical body wasn't very physical. It was much more in the etheric ray. And being very watery and etheric, there were 4 sub-races within the Atlantean third epoch root race. And one was Lion Man, Bull Man, Eagle Man, and I can't remember the other one, but they're the 4 on the tarot, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Lon's talking about this all the time, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the Lion Man, right, is one of the sub races of the Atlantean, and that they had the lion heart and they had the kind of the lion vibe. Yeah. As a section of the root race, right? And so then you have the bullish ones and the birdish ones and whatever the 4th one was, right? And so this is a literal demonstration of an Atlantean in what would be in a more etheric form than what we have today. So that's, again, how Steiner might interpret that. But I was just reading it the other day, so I'm a little bit fuzzy on the details, but it blew my mind because it does explain so much of the Egyptian iconography as well, right? Because the Egyptians have the eagle head and the dog head and the tiger head, right? And that thing always kind of sat with me very interestingly. So I don't know, sweetie, but that's a Steiner sci-fi take for you.
I like that. That vibes with my kind of way of looking at things.
How do you see it? How do you see it?
Well, I was thinking that this interpretation in this story was obviously bullshit, and what I was reading, that's why I just kind of stopped reading the article. But I was thinking that yes, there is a connection to like what Lon was talking about. I think it's on his tarot cards, right? He uses all four of those. That yes, this could be a connection to that, or it could also be chance what you're talking about too before, about some sort of representation of something within physiology. So I was just kind of thinking about that, but also too that I really tend to think that people from that era, like what you were saying, Venice, that there are different root races of humankind that might be a symbol. You know, the lion, they don't look like that. They weren't actual lion men, but like you were saying, that they have those aspects and attributes of the archetype of them. And that in this era, again, we're talking about a people that didn't distinguish between magic, religion, and technology. So that symbolism would be inherent within this. So yeah, I would like to think that these mammoth tusk figurines are some sort of representation. Perhaps that might be what the Sphinx is, the Sphinx in Egypt, that could be representative of that race. And perhaps maybe, because I've heard people say before, no, it's a dog, or it used to look one way and it's been chiseled down. And I wonder if like, well, has it just been edited? You know, did somebody come along and edit the Sphinx, so to speak? But I maybe we could go off on that tangent a little bit and talk about the Egyptian Sphinx and see, you know, maybe what your guys' opinion is on that. Is it older than the pyramids? Is it newer than the pyramids? Same age? The
real interesting show at the Sphinx, very few people pay attention to. It's actually the Valley Temple that's right next to the Sphinx, by the paw of the Sphinx. That it doesn't look like Egyptian architecture. It looks very much like Stonehenge. It's a post and lentil structure. And there's only one other example of post and lentil. Is that
little birdie?
Little parrot. That's the woman. The husband will show up in a minute, and he won't let his wife.
He'll like, where's the seed? What? Give us the seed.
There's going to be a domestic situation out there in a minute. So the Valley Temple is unique, except for this other thing called the Osirion. And the Osirion is mammoth. It's almost scary. It looks alien because it's so big and so perfect. And it has those amazing there's the husband.
And it's underground too. Like it's literally, it's kind of flooded now because it's so low down.
There's an accumulation of silt anywhere. And so the way that historians can tell how old something is if you have a very regular accretion of silt. So, you know, the ground level, if you go down 20 or 30 feet, you're going back a certain amount in time. And so the Osirion, when the Osirion was on bedrock, it was vastly, vastly older. And so the Valley Temple is this very strange, no hieroglyphs like the pyramid. It seems to be done way before. The pyramid and the Valley Temple might well be contemporary, all way before the Sphinx, way before the Sphinx. You can tell by the building techniques. The Sphinx was incredibly old. And one of the things that John West really spent a lot of time on, the thing, in fact, Schwaller pointed this out and John took it and ran with it. And most of John's book and John's whole argument with Egyptology was predicated on this idea that the Sphinx is in this sunken enclosure. And this is the Sahara Desert where the rainfall is negligible for, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So it's kind of, if you go back to the Ice Age, and maybe before the Ice Age was the last time that you saw a significant amount of rain. So John's work, and where he brought Robert Schoch into the argument, was showing water erosion on the Sphinx structure. So we know the Sphinx is quite old, but the Valley Temple appears to be way, way older. And if you go to the Valley Temple, this is one of the great things about being on one of the legendary John West Egyptian tours, is John took you around to all these places and he showed you this was one of the first structures that they talk about in dynastic Egypt. But in the structure as it is, the structure is overbuilt over something vastly older. We just went to Angkor Wat not too long ago, right at the beginning, right before the quarantines. And Angkor Wat, same thing. They say Angkor Wat's about 900 years old, but there's places where the oldest parts of it are overbuilt on something that looks like it was in an atomic war. It's so old and it's so weathered. It was like dinosaurs.
I want to put a pin right there in what you're saying. An ancient atomic war is something that's been a pet theory of mine. That, you know, sometimes people have talked about is it the Bhagavad Gita that describe, or no, the yeah. But this idea that there could have at one point been a nuclear war here on the planet, maybe before even Atlantis time frame, but it's just something where if you go around and find that, what is it, the vitrified glass, you find these areas where there's just this green glass, and it's not from lightning.
Ocean of glass. There's a military installation there. There's some of the coolest places in Egypt and in Pakistan where that sea of glass is. They actually put a military installation, so you're forbidden to go. There's a ruin in Egypt that is now a garbage dump that used to be a military. It's on a military land, and it's a landfill. It's full of garbage so that nobody can go and explore it. And it makes the pyramid look like an idiot. It's so old and it's so big and it's so perfect. And it's just, it's like something from a Ridley Scott movie. But anyway, that sea of glass is super cool. And it is only because nobody, including the Indians, it's such a shame that like Chinese people don't do herbal medicine. Like you got to go to California, you got to go to the States to get somebody who's really good at Chinese medicine or acupuncture.
Yep.
It's a new breed of people. There's a great kid, Praveen, somebody who is
going around looking at it all.
Yeah, he's doing what John West did to Egypt, looking at India. And India appears in a lot of ways when you start studying. In episode 3, by the way, we really start drilling deep on the symbolism of the risen cobra as an indicator of Kundalini. And that was a Vedic thing way before. In a lot of cases, I sometimes wonder if Egypt never disappeared, but it moved to Asia, because ancient Asia seems to be a continuation, you know, the papyrus, the early use of paper and stuff. But there's so much in Egypt that wasn't an original, but it was a continuation of Babylonian and Sumerian and Mesopotamian architecture. But it is, like you'd said, it is commonly discussed, flying vehicles and the rod of Indra, these weapons that were so awful that everyone, even the gods, were hesitant to use them. And they talked about the glowing mushroom cloud that would happen afterwards. Right. So when you see sand and in particular radiation, you know, the presence of radiation after all this time in those places, it sure does seem like there's a nuclear war.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And sometimes we look at the craters and I look at the moon and wonder, man, did that moon get nuked? I look at Mars.
Did you know that Cairo in Egypt, Nasser is what they call it, is the name for Mars, and that, you know, people believe. I got to interact with Richard Hoagland. I'll just leave it at that without adding any adjectives or metaphors. You know, the work that he did on Sidonia, and it was a kind of an interesting tangent, if we're throwing tangents about that. Earth was a continuation of after the Martian civilization was destroyed.
Sorry, what was a continuation?
Got
it. Yeah. And I know. I tend to think that too. Yeah, I've had dreams about what I can only call Mars. I don't know it's Mars. I could be here with an orange sky, but I just there's just this idea that I have, and people might not like it, but my idea is that I think there were humans just like us on at least the inner planets of our solar system and perhaps beyond, that at one point, you know, this might have, you know, imagine like our current civilization here would be like the group of people that you'd find at an international terminal at an airport. And there might be, you know, all kinds of different, you know, people speaking Mandarin, people speaking Cantonese, people speaking Mexico Spanish, people speaking English, people speaking all these different languages. And if everything but that international terminal at an airport was destroyed, and there was just those people left over that, you know, started having children with each other, and, you know, they just, the only history they know is what they brought into that room together, that I kind of wonder if that's what,
if you do the etymology and the words that they use, a lot of times people use words and names and they don't realize that they're bringing their history with them through their use of names and stuff. We got to one of the amazing things that we've done in our life, is we got to go and stay with the immortal John Michel in London for a while. And John wrote this amazing book about England and about ley lines and stuff. But there are, in the ancient burial mounds, you know, there's a giant sperm cell, there's the not Vitruvian Man, the Sheridan probably knows what this is, that giant man on the hillside in England. But Jean-Michel did a lot of work about how some of the noticeable configurations and surface features in Mars were recreated in ancient mound building things. So there's definitely something there.
Yeah, and I just wonder, is the scar on Mars, was that also nuclear or hydrogen bomb type something?
It looks like a drive-by on the freeway, like a planet went by and scraped it, which is the Velikovsky.
Yeah, or I just wonder, was it like a glancing blow of something like a Death Star? And there's what is it? Speaking of the Death Star, is it Iapetus, the moon, or is it Io that looks like the Death Star? I think it's Iapetus.
Arthur C. Clarke specifically mentioned that, and the Death Star looks so much like it. And it has a seam running down its side, like it's two hemispheres, like it was built together. That Moonfall movie looks cool.
I know. I definitely want. Is that out yet?
I keep looking for it. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, it's been in the back of my mind.
We can't go to the theater right now, so I don't know.
But just this idea, though, that I like it, that it feels right to me that at one point the planets were around us were inhabited just people that looked just like us, and that's why maybe here on Earth certain people have a struggle with the basic living conditions of this planet because the one they came from, their genetics might have been used to a lighter gravity or atmosphere that was slightly different. And, coming here to Earth, you're like, oh my God, my fucking sinuses being on this planet, whatever it is. And there's just certain races that, right. Yeah. And there's just certain things like that. Oh, did you know
that biologically we're not, the 24-hour sleep cycle is not indigenous to us, that we're optimized to a completely different solar orbit?
Makes sense.
What's that?
32 hours is optimal for us. You have to check and see what the orbiting periodicity is of Mars or other places. Yeah. And also the moon looks like it was brought here from somewhere else, that the moon is older than the Earth.
I've heard that before. And we acquired it and put it there as a satellite, but, also bringing it into consciousness too, like the idea of a moon child being created out of it. But there's something to it that's not discussed. And when it is discussed, they always talk about gray aliens. And, there's the official alternative narrative that immediately goes to that, and it's like, no, it's not that either, but there might be aspects of the truth in both the official dumb version and parts of the alternative version, but none of it gets down to the root of things.
I wonder sometimes if Ancient Aliens wasn't a really clever method of just get that guy that looks like he's hanging upside down, his hair is all coiffed up.
It's funny. When I wake up in the morning, my hair looks that, and I told Timothy, should I do my hair like Giorgio today? And I was literally going to have my hair like Giorgio. So it's funny that you said that. Yeah, I'm
not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens. There's never been anything done more effectively to rob the credibility out of ancient alternative history. So if Thomas it was a psyop, I was so angry when that show came out because it was the one question. I'm interested. I love Zecharia Sitchin and.
Yep.
That question certainly is an important question, but when it was done in such a, I don't want to be too derogatory about it, but it was a fantastic work of
misdirection,
discrediting and misdirection if it was meant to be that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Thomas, as we're talking about him, I do want to play his psychic weather report right now. So we'll take a little break here from talking, and I'm going to play a little bit of pre-recorded Thomas.
Is it bad? Is it great? Are you happy? Are you irate? The weekend psychic weather.
This is the period of the dream oracle. This is where we examine our dreams. I'm getting an awful lot of messages people saying they're having incredible dreams at the moment. Very strange, very cryptic dreams. Dreams relating to elements of transference and transcendence. And these are always significant. So pay attention to your dreams. This is your subconscious mind communicating to you about the year ahead and what lies there. And don't take them literally. Remember, dreams are a poetic unfoldment, a kind of a fleeting metaphor that goes through our somnambulistic lives and indicates changes afoot. But they're not fated changes. They're insights from other realities which we exist in when our sleep. And this alternate or complementary reality within the Monomythic world is directly related to the physical world that you live in right now, in that almost the same kind of people and events will happen. But because it's very difficult for you to communicate directly, your subconscious is older than the time before writing and language. And therefore, it has to communicate in a very symbolic and metaphor-like laden way. So what you're getting are poetic allegories of events that are happening on the zeitgeist, because so many people are having these. Most important thing of all is this is a very good time, if you don't have a dream journal or a dream diary, to get one of them going. Do not instantly apply meaning or desire for unraveling the cryptic messages within these dreams. They're not actually cryptic, by the way, they're metaphors. It's a very different thing altogether. The subconscious mind is not hiding this stuff from you. It's communicating to you in the only infrastructure of converse and dialogue and convention it understands, and that's symbolism and metaphor. So they're not cryptic messages, and don't ever think that way. And again, you will not be able to decipher, and I don't mean that again, that sounds cryptic, to find what I was trying to say for a few weeks at least. And then you have a comparison across the dreams, and then you're able to relate that to changes in the real world. So pay attention to your dreams. Don't overanalyze them. Just like synchronicity, go with them. You're being told something. Let your subconscious mind guide you and be the operating system of your Monomythic insights and how they can help you, guide you, and tell you what's going on within this based reality. So that's the psychic weather for this week. Pay attention to the dream oracle, because right now the oracle is on fire.
Is it bad? Is it great? Are you happy? Are you irate? The week in psychic weather.
Okay. Thank you, Thomas, for that wonderful psychic weather report. And I completely agree with him that right now the oracle is on fire. The dreams I've been having are incredibly intense. There's all kinds of weird shit going on with electronics, and I'm trying to, for whatever reason, the inspection code for the source code on Facebook is showing on half of my screen right now, so I'm trying to get that back together as I'm talking. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of psychic stuff going on, and my dreams are intense. I'm sure plenty of you are having intense dreams right now. I'm trying to get the chat back online. Venice and Chance, are you still there, or am I talking to myself? I can't tell.
We're here, honey.
Okay, good. All right, just making sure that this whole thing didn't crash. I'm
No,
gonna
we're
hand this
here.
over to you guys so I can get this script off of my screen.
I absolutely love that, because I'm having crazy ass dreams myself. I have to say, like, even last night, it was the dream, and I had like all these great friends from all of these different places. Ooh, okay. Oh, our microphone's changed, but I think it's okay. Have you noticed that yourself, sweetie? Dreams?
Yes, sorry. Oh, that one. Go ahead.
Chance has nightmares a lot. I'm always having to wake him up, like, wake up.
I have the night terrors, like Homer Simpson.
Yeah.
But I like what Thomas said too about don't try to overanalyze them. Just let them seep. You know, I think that's really, really important to kind of let them just sink in, and they'll make sense of themselves in good time, because sometimes you can spin yourself off on a direction that doesn't necessarily serve you if you push too hard, right? All things come in their own time.
Thomas's idea of a dream journal is really cool. And, you know, it seems obvious when someone says it, but if you actually sit down and do it,
It's magical.
Venice interviewed Gary Lockman a while back, and Gary Lockman was a real advocate of that. And he started talking about how predictive that if you really pay attention, it happens more often than you think that you get predictive programming, you know, you visions of the future in your dreamscapes. And so, as Thomas said, nobody really has come forward with a satisfactory explanation of what dreams even are. Why are they necessary? Very tied into the DMT mechanism. But predictive dreams, interesting. There were rulers. There's stories of rulers who assembled like the smartest men in the land because a ruler would wake up with such a vivid and mystifying dream that he would pull all of his wise men together and say, what the hell does this dream mean?
Well, in the indigenous cultures here, like the Australian indigenous and Africa as well, it's very common for the tribe to get together in the morning and discuss the dreams, right? And did you have the same information? We had the same dream. Like dreams are dreams. There's something going on, right? We just haven't got to the bottom of it yet.
And as Thomas said, like that part of our psyche is much older than, I want to say, the linguistic, just as you were saying earlier, Chance, about language. It's just like there are parts of the way we operate that are ancient and still, but like, there's still this thing to try to suppress it. Like Thomas mentioned something earlier about the, that's a really weird sound. Hold on. I don't know what that is, but there's a weird sound in the house. Are you guys still there?
Yes, darling.
Okay.
Yes.
You were frozen for a second. Okay. All right. So weird shit's going on. But when it rains, yeah. It almost sounded like an air raid siren or something, but it's gone.
Oh,
with what you've got going on, there might have been helicopters.
I'm keeping
right?
quiet about that right now.
Okay.
I don't want to put any attention on it. But yeah, so I like that, we're on this thread with everything tying nicely back together to ancient Egypt and Atlantis. I've got about 25 more minutes here until I need to go at 2:45 p.m. It's 2:19 p.m. here on the west coast of the United States. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the next story here, which kind of is a nice caveat of what we're talking to. And oh shit, my browser closed all the stories. So I'm going to ramble for just a moment while I pull these stories back up.
Well,
again.
I'll tell you something about dreams as well, right? In the Oracle of Delphi, around that stage, people would go in and go to sleep and get a dream, right, and have it interpreted by the oracle. So back in the ancient days, it was determined as a very valid mechanism for obtaining information, right? Like they actually had temples for it. So, and MIT is doing it now again. So that's kind of cool that they're bringing back the oracle.
I'd sure be interested in any kind of studies about what serotonin uptake. When I left America, which was decades ago, Washington was leading the world, and there was a period of time where it was like 1 in 3 people were on serotonin uptake. And what is that doing to your spiritual mechanism?
SSRIs are so dangerous. Yeah.
And Thomas points out too that if you're even on weed, it disrupts your dreaming capacity as well, which is kind of interesting. I drink wine and I dream a lot, but maybe I'm having bad dreams because of the wine. But it doesn't seem to stop me from.
I have hell dreams when I go to bed drunk. I've stopped. I haven't drank in quite a while, but I literally have hell dreams where I'm trapped in spaces like Twilight Zone spaces where I keep traveling in one direction and I keep returning to the same room. The awesome scene in the David Lynch film. Alcohol, I was
going to say with that, my dad gave me wonderful advice when I was a young man. I think I was maybe in my teenage years, but he said, like, if you're going to drink, make sure like you are sober when you go to sleep. Don't ever go to sleep when you're drunk.
Very insightful.
And I don't remember when he told me that, and I might have altered what he said just a little bit, but that's a piece of advice from my dad I've taken where it's like, okay,
and advice that I hope nobody ever has to take is do not commit suicide when you're drinking.
Oh,
why?
That's
your mechanism for leaving is taken offline.
All right, that's something it's a really dark thing to say, but really good advice for folks like. We have to go into the darkness. So if you're gonna die, if you're gonna kill yourself, maybe sober it out a little bit and rethink things. Real talk here. But
in the depression, very much like now, that talk about how humanity keeps repeating itself over 100-year cycles, and we're very much coming back to the place. Well, we're in the thick of it right now that we were in the 30s before when. This is a great stock market crash, and there was a massive, unprecedented number of suicides. And there's so many people that have been adversely affected by the shutdown of society and the killing of small business. That it's very underreported. Suicides here in Australia are through the roof, and It's a horrible thing to talk about, but sometimes things flourish in the darkness, and light is a huge disinfectant. And maybe somebody will start up a dating service for the suicidally inclined to give people a little light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I like that.
I should jump
yeah.
on that. That's a big money maker.
The thing is, again, going back to ancient Egypt, whether you want to look at the text, like the pyramid text, as a shamanic approach to being reborn, right? Or in fact, a manual on how to die, is clear that the ancients had a lot more familiarity with that process. And we're today like, la, 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 la. Okay. We have no idea.
We aren't, but they are. I want to make that distinction. We don't. We're not.
Darling.
Right.
Exactly. We're on to it. But there's a lot of wisdom to be gleaned about how to actually make that journey properly, right?
Book of the Dead, people. Tibetan Book of the Dead.
Yeah, the Bardo. Yeah, I know that's why I get really annoyed with spiritualists who are trying to talk to dead relatives on Ouija boards. It's like, no, you're talking to something else that might be looking around at the memories that you have of that loved one. But you just open up a portal that can't be closed. Yeah. So so I want to jump ahead to this next story here, which has a little bit of a tie into what we're talking about. Let me get the image going.
Oh.
Okay. Egypt archaeologists unearth stunning ancient time capsule with 18,000 notes from the past. The discovery was made in the ancient Egyptian town of Arthribis, Athribis. I hope I said that right. Near the modern city of Sohag, Egypt. Experts uncovered thousands of ostraca, which are inscribed pieces of pottery. They were used as notepads thousands of years ago for ancient Egyptians to write private letters, laundry lists, and literary works. Professor Christian Leitz, a researcher with the Institute for Ancient Near East Studies, said, quote, in ancient times, ostraca were used in large quantities as writing material and inscribed with ink and reed on a hollow stick, unquote. In a statement, the team added, the ostraca provide a variety of insights into the everyday life of Arthribis. Around 80% of the post-herds are inscribed in Demotic, the common administrative script of the Ptolemaic and Roman periods, which developed from Hieratic after 600 BCE. Among the second most common finds of the ostraca with Greek script, which we also came across inscriptions in hieratic, hieroglyphic, and more rarely Coptic and Arabic scripts. There are a variety of different ostraca. Some have picture, some words, and others a mixture. The team added, the contents of the ostraca vary from lists to names of accounts and different foods and items of daily use. A surprisingly large number of sherds could be assigned to an ancient school. There are lists of months, numbers, arithmetic problems, grammar exercises, and a bird alphabet. Each letter was assigned a bird whose name began with that letter. Okay, so I mean, again, I think this one is interesting, but part of me wonders if this is more kind of academia stuff, layering some sort of misdirect onto Egypt again. I don't know if this is something that you all have come across before. I want to say maybe this is a artifact of the current people who are living in Egypt or living in that part of the world, which are not necessarily descendants of the ancient Egyptians. That, you know, maybe this is the common era folk who arrived, you know, like we talked about, you know, maybe within the last 6,000 years or arrived. I used a weird word for that, but it showed up in history within, you know, the cradle of civilization time frame, and that this is not from the people who built the pyramids. That, you know, this is obviously something that's not ancient and advanced.
You can tell from the fact that they use demotic. Demotic is much later method of writing than the pyramids would be. And the pyramids might be so crazy old that it had nothing to do with the Egyptians. It might have been built by dolphins or dinosaurs or something. By the way, if you go into the pyramid was not built for human architecture. If you could pivot at the waist like a velociraptor or something, then that architecture is super comfortable for you. I'm not making any assertions there. But anyway, the use of demotic is kind of a giveaway there. That and it's sort of interesting that for such a long time, everyone was so adamant that nothing happened before 3500 BC. And then when Göbekli Tepe happened, at least John got to live long enough to see Göbekli Tepe. And John used to say when he was younger, he was quite a feisty man. He was a man who loved to fight, and he was not polite to people who disagreed with him. And one of his famous sayings was, by the time I get finished, you're going to eat so much crow that something. I'd often talk to him about making a cookbook of crow cookbook, which would probably be delicious if you, or kookaburras, which are also delicious, I can tell you. But they were so adamant that nothing happened before 3500 BC. And then when Göbekli Tepe happened, they had to revise their estimates. And as we say, Michael Cremo has been showing that there's been civilizations that go millions and millions of years. And it's just a natural property of the earth that it keeps churning and destroying what's on the surface.
Yeah.
Well, they lost me at laundry list.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, here's another thing that reminded me of. We have in the can, and I don't know when we're going to deploy this. We spent an amazing amount of time with Stephen Skinner, this fantastically, just super cool guy, a magician and a scholar of ancient magic. There was tons and tons of magical spells on papyri. And where's that book? It's just right here somewhere. Skinner's book. He has a book where he's taken all of these registers, these logs of spells
Of actual magicians.
and like when Egypt started falling apart after the Roman occupation and stuff, the temples fell out of regular operation. And so a lot of the priests went freelance, and they would do just spells for people who would show up and say, I want this girl to be in love with me, or I want to make a bunch of money, or whatever. And so academia took these papyri with all these spells, and it has the actual text of the spells, so you can do them yourselves if you're so inclined. But they had a completely mistaken understanding of what these were. And they said they're jumbled, and there's a lot of idiot nonsense words, and they call them barbaric words. And what Skinner showed was, and they were all jumbled together in this way that didn't really make any sense. And what Skinner showed was that it wasn't that they were disorganized in their thinking and their application of magic, but a priest would keep a registry of what spells he did throughout the day. And he would write down the basics of which spells he did. And so in the course of, like, a dentist shows up, and one guy's there for his molar, and one guy's there for an impacted whatever. And you just do what people pay you to do as they show up. And so Skinner took all of those spells and recodified them and organized them into sensible groups. And so
then the most important part, tested every single one.
Tested them all. So in his books, he talks about his actual, and it's creepy, freaky how well these things worked. The kookaburra is fighting with himself.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
Fly, and he'll bang into the mirror because he sees a rival that looks exactly like him. I did that. It hurt my nose. I was doing that for a while.
Can I tell one spell?
You're gonna have to turn him into dinner or lunch. Yeah.
I know. Look, it's just this.
He's going to. Because
this
it sounds like a hand grenade going off in the house when we're sleeping, and he starts doing that. Anyway, go ahead.
Poor Dr. Skinner had. He was robbed of all his stuff in his house. It was very, very upsetting. And so he did one of these spells, which is the spell to have your stolen goods returned to you, right? And so he did the spell, and it was from this Greco-Egyptian magic book. And he gets a phone call from a guy. He said, hey, look, we've stolen all your stuff. If you pay us $3,000, we'll give it back to you, right? And so he calls the police, and they capture him, and he gets all his stuff back, right? This stuff, and a lot of it's really like mundane stuff. Whoops.
A really cool story about that was that Alexander and several Roman emperors were incredibly threatened by magic. That one of a fantastic story that Skinner tells that I didn't realize, but it makes absolute sense. Before Rome was able to subjugate Egypt, for the kind of, the technology had reached the point of chariots and horses. Horses were kind of a late adoption in Egypt. But the generals who finally defeated Egypt, what they did beforehand was they sent out centurions and soldiers to seize all the magical scrolls. So they bound their hands magically. They stole from them all their magical references before they attacked because they were so intimidated by, but generally believed that they would never defeat Egypt as long as Egypt had recourse to these magical scrolls. There was an amazing English film, and I can't remember the name of it now, and I keep wanting to chauviniste, but it was a whole film about the point of the FBI and the CIA nowadays is just to suppress people using magic. You don't have to know the name of that film, do you?
No.
Anybody who knows that film, who's seen that film and knows the name, please.
Not the Golden
please.
Compass.
No.
Oh, it's about the kids in school.
The kid accidentally rediscovers certain magical words of power, and as soon as he starts making use of operative magic, the FBI or MI5, because it's English, show up.
Yeah.
And say, literally, our whole job is to keep magic suppressed and to keep people from adopting it because royalties never liked it when
Oh, man. Somebody needs to drop this one in the comments, either here on Facebook or on YouTube, about whatever the name of this movie is, because I would like to see it. Because I agree with that's one of the objectives, if not the primary objective of those agencies. It's incredibly interesting that they're, I'm fully aware of a magical group that was infiltrated in the 1950s by one of those agencies with that agency's sole purpose was to disperse the effectiveness of that magic and to render it inert and to keep the operation going, but to render that operation inert. And,
royalty has always believed that magic is the sole domain of royalty, and if the commoners start using magic, then the order is going to break down. And imagine, just like Tesla got suppressed. Where would we be had Tesla not been suppressed? Where would we be right now if magic had not
Wilhelm Reich
withdrawn from us? And Wilhelm Reich was destroyed. I wouldn't say what he was doing is magic
sexual
per se,
energy,
but anyway, I'm glad that you are. And I would. It is the coolest movie in the world. It's very factual and realistic.
We'll find it. We'll let you know.
Somebody's going to put it in the comments.
Yeah.
But this is just such an interesting thing, because going back to like what we're talking about is that throughout the thread of this show is that magic, if it's going back to Atlantis through many other civilizations, that we have it still here now. And yes, there are people out there who are aware of, that we are doing this now, and we do have to be a little careful and a little bit tactically operational to protect this and look after each other and watch each other's backs a little bit, because when people out there start actually doing these things, stuff happens.
I think the after studying magic for 3 years now, kind of from a point zero, what I've found is that fundamentally the masses don't understand what magic is to start with, right? Like, they think it's and Buffy or whatever, all those Netflix shows with all the cute blonde girls doing magic. And it's not at all. It's not at all. And that is the most liberating and empowering thing of all, because what it is available to all of us, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, it literally is the most empowering thing to find out. It's not what's on TV, but trying to get people to understand what it actually is kind of like there's so many foundation levels of information that you have to get them to cross before they can fundamentally understand, right? And like the hardest one is the spiritual, because of the word spiritual materialistic divide, and let's call it the invisible visible divide, right? It's like we've been shut down, conditioned out of the invisible, that when invisible things happen, people are like, nah, that couldn't be.
Psychic censorship. Yeah. That thing's so real, having a sensor, not a sensor with an S, but a sensor with a C, a psychic sensor, that when something like that happens, it's like a state of dissociation occurs where people go, oh, no, that's not possible. Not going to look at that. But, you're describing, there's an initiatory system, and it's something that everybody can do. The thing is, the key word of that is do. It's work that has to be done. Like, you can study and you can do all that, but it's a doingness,
It's a doingness.
Right. And
one of the few things
start doing, they light up. Yeah. We light up. Yeah. And people see that light, and it gets a little dangerous sometimes, and things come to that light.
One of the few things I miss about Los Angeles is I have a dear friend, Lon Duquette, who as an officiator and
He knows
in the
Lon.
OTO. Do you know Lon?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had him on the show. Yeah.
Oh, really? Just
Yep.
one of my favorite people in the world. He's been a dear friend
Yeah.
of mine for a really long time. So I used to go a lot with him to the OTO meetings. And he even introduced us to the OTO people in Melbourne when we moved over here. Lon and I have a music video on YouTube. You can look it up. Lon and I did a musical duet, and that's all I'll say about it. So, anyway,
I'm gonna have to check that out. No, I haven't seen that one yet.
it's not for everyone. I can tell you that in advance. There were people in the OTO that should not have been there. There are people there that were there for the wrong reasons, and it was genuinely terrifying. These people with these deep bits of anger and unresolved resentment to people, and
But
There are
also
some people
maybe
who
on
should
purpose
not.
planted there, right? Are you saying that too?
Plants,
oh,
yep.
I'm sure there was that, but also just organically, sometimes the very worst people are drawn to magic for the very worst
Yeah.
reasons, and so in a way, you can kind of see why that would be intimidating to people whose job it was to maintain order. But on the other hand,
Yeah.
when it works for noble causes and things that I loved about the OTO meetings were these passion plays where you recreate these things, and very Masonic. You recreate these
Yep.
rituals, and as years later, you're like, "Oh, I get it. I was I was an avatar of an archetype in this thing." And by the way, the walkway from Luxor to Karnak, when you enact that walk, we were just in Angkor Wat, as I said, and there's 4 bridges that go to Angkor Wat, and on the bridges there's these amazing statues of divas and asuras, angels and demons, holding a snake, and this bridge represents the spine, and you are the Kundalini. You are the avatar of the Kundalini as you walk through this procession. And the whole thing is this giant 3D living sculpture of the Kundalini process. I didn't Pingala and all that, but you as the aspirant, or as the person who visits the temple, you enact the path of Kundalini, and the temple represents the body, and a very cool bit of correspondence magic.
And
Yeah.
that's actually another thing that people really don't understand. And the word has lost so much of its power is imagination, right?
Mhm.
People are like, oh, I'm just imagining that, or you're just imagining that, or they've literally reduced the power of the word of what imagination is to about 5% of what it really is, right? So
Yeah,
when you're
just
walking,
imagining that.
yeah, it's like imagine if you can imagine it, you can make it, be it, create it, right? And so when you're walking through these temples and you are being Kundalini, you're imagining that, you're creating that within your body, right? And the same
Right.
thing with the Temple of Luxor. So when he's saying their manuals, it's not like a manual in the old-fashioned sense where you turn to page 37, how do I get the pineal to work? You're literally embodying the processes with full engagement of the imagination. And it's amazing. It's amazing.
And this is what spiritual religious technology was. It's not the dogma of Abrahamism. It's not that. It's something tremendously, and I don't want to use this word wrong, but it's something tremendously practical, something tremendously everyday. And that's what's kind of beautiful about the chaos movement is with chaos magic, you're bringing the everyday world life around you, your mundane life, and looking for symbolism and synchronicity within it, because it is a different era than the Golden Dawn era. We're not all Aleister Crowley who was independently wealthy and could dress up and put himself into these states. Chaos magic came out of an era where this era that we're in now, and again the era is changing, and there's a new form of magic that is emerging through that, and as a successor to the chaos movement. But it's like, that's why I think some of these things, the zeitgeist, or excuse me, the egregore is still there. And like you were talking about, sometimes it needs to be blown up, like what the Rosicrucians do. But it's like, I feel like we're at that point now, or maybe it's already been blown up, and we're creating this new paradigm magically. And it's a beautiful thing to be a part of this with you and Chance and Thomas and Timony and everybody out there who's part of this greater family, this magical family that we all have. And I do need to start wrapping this up here in a few minutes. I don't know if Chance is taking a bathroom break, or if he's still on camera or on set.
He ran out the door.
Well, I hope everything's okay.
You scared him off, darling. No, I'm sure he's fine.
But
No, here he comes. Here he comes.
Okay.
Here he comes. Yeah,
But
we
yeah,
have
I
to
just-
go. So say goodbye, honey.
yeah,
Jason was just saying how lovely it is to have us all be part of the magical family.
I can imagine what a treat for you this must be.
absolutely. And
what?
it's just what I was saying, that like this thing that we talked about, the chaos movement, and how as a magical paradigm, it was a necessity after, because not everybody living in the 21st century has time to do Golden Dawn rituals or be independently wealthy like Aleister Crowley and dress up and do all these tremendous things. You know, the chaos movement made it possible for everyday life to show you the synchronicities. But now, as we're going into 2020 and beyond, into the next Renaissance period, it's like a new magical paradigm is being created, and it's lovely to be able to be creating this paradigm with both of you and with Thomas and Timony and everybody in Beyond Room 313. And
the old system is eating itself. It's literally self-destructing, and it's eating itself. It's cannibalizing itself. There's some information coming out about the Vatican. There is somebody that Cliff High talks about, who's a biblical scholar who's finally got access to the original source material of the Bible. And there's some very deeply entrenched, long-held institutions that are literally crumbling under the light of scrutiny. And what's left? People are going to replace that with a new operating system. And once, it's like when the currency fails and you have to go to something else, the new magical currency, the new spiritual currency, is going to be this old paradigm that all of us, for whatever reason, perhaps residue from previous lives, we're bringing this back and codifying it and putting it into practice and showing other people. It doesn't necessarily mean you're insane, that you're interested in this stuff. And all you have to do, like you said, is do it. You go from speculative to operative. That's an incredibly important word. Go from speculative to operative, and suddenly you'll find this isn't a weird belief system. It's a machine code. It's an operating system.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I was saying, it's tremendously practical, and some might say mundane, but not in a negative sense of that word. But it's part of our everyday life. You know, it's not something we have to tremendously change. Life becomes magical. Your existence is a ritual. And you mentioned Cliff. Got a big up Cliff here. We got a couple of people in the comments saying, "Oh, we love Cliff." But yeah, I'd love to get him on sometime. I've reached out to him, and me too.
He didn't have time for me.
Right. Same. Yeah. So, but if y'all can wrangle him, maybe we can kidnap him and get him on Zoom sometime and get some information. We're really good
friends with Max Egan. We're dear friends with Max. We see Max before he left.
Mexico.
Cliff really likes Max, so maybe somehow through Max we'll get a hold.
Please get them both. I would love to have.
Super important guy. That's for my money, as an ongoing commentary and just an anchor of sanity through all of these houses of cards and sand and mirrors. Cliff kept us from panicking and doing anything out of stupidity or panic. And if it's so addictive to hear somebody thinking clearly. And our episode 3, by the way, is all about Kundalini, and we're trying to bring Kundalini out of the fringes and show the fact that a lot of people in the West, more and more people, in fact, are having Kundalini experiences. It's a new emerging property like this. Yeah. It's basically an evidence of an emergent consciousness in the Western world that was not a big deal in the Indian world, but absolutely unheard of. And in fact, specifically withdrawn from our lexicon, from our culture. Cliff had a Kundalini experience. You hear stories of people who've had different side effects because of Kundalini. And Cliff's was that he was impressed to use specific language, accuracy of language. And it's one of his geniuses. It's a reason why he's so amazing to listen to, because it's something that I really need to learn from. Specifics, precision of language. It's a side of genius, and it's a prompter of genius. And I can't recommend Cliff enough. Good on you for knowing who Cliff is.
Oh, I love Cliff. Yeah. If we could get him and Max Egan and Thomas and you, me and Timony, and get a symposium going with that meeting of the minds, we might break the internet. But I think that would be
Max is a whaler on the guitar. Max is a wicked guitar player.
And I know we can get Max, honey. I don't know about Cliff, but I can get us Max.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I would love to do a symposium with you two, Max, Thomas, Timony, get us all talking about this, and we'll riff off of each other again, have a jam session. Yes. Yeah. And this has been an incredible jam session with you guys. I do need to run, but thank you so much. And thank you to everybody on Facebook. We love you, and we appreciate having you here. So, night, everyone.